do you want to get your pre-baby body back? We need to get rid of that language. You need to look after yourself to be the best mum you can be. Well, I call bullshit on that and say you need to look after yourself because you deserve to be looked after and you get to be a great mum. We're not taught about our bodies, which I think is a real problem. Society don't give women the tools and the education to be empowered. You've got the cohort of women who are afraid to exercise. And then you've got another cohort of women that say, I'm pregnant. Now I need to move because it's not only about me. Women don't know what to do. They don't know where to get proper advice from. And this is one of the biggest myths that we've had in the fitness space.
Wow. This is Fernwood Unfiltered, the podcast for straight up expert-based advice about women's health and fitness. Women's bodies are absolutely incredible. If you're thinking about having kids one day, if you're pregnant or juggling motherhood with life and your fitness goals, this episode is for you. Whether you want safe exercise tips, help rebuilding strength, or advice to stay motivated long term, you'll get a lot from this chat. Share it with your mum friends, share it with all your friends, mums to be, or anyone thinking about starting a family. Jen Dugard is a pre- and postnatal educator, author, and fitness business coach on a mission to change how mums are supported in the fitness world. She also helps other fitness professionals build strong, impactful businesses so they can create real change and empower women in their health and fitness journeys. And I am thrilled that Jen joins us on Fernwood Unfiltered. Jen, how are you?
I'm good, Georgie. How are you?
I'm so well.
Excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. How often do you think would you get unsolicited questions from people about their life? Just being like, Jen, fix everything. Tell me everything.
It's funny, isn't it? You go to a party and you just share what you do and then all of a sudden you've got this relay of questions and you're like, can you just go and get a personal trainer or go to a doctor?
Yes. Is the answer.
Yeah,
no,
clearly
it's you.
No is the answer. So we definitely get a bunch of questions when people learn, or I get a lot of questions when people learn what I do.
How do you describe what you do?
I say I'm a pre- and postnatal educator, absolutely. Sometimes I use the word personal trainer to put it in a box for people. So I used to be a personal trainer specialising in working with mums, with pre- and postnatal women. And now I try to start there and I move it along and say I'm a pre- and postnatal educator. So I train the trainers that train the mums.
I'm so excited. I have so many questions. Before we get into our full chat, for the woman who's listening to this, what is the one takeaway that they're going to get?
I'm going to try and put it into one sentence, but then my brain goes the one woman, and the woman could be a woman before she's had a baby, a pregnant woman, a postpartum woman, or a woman that is way beyond that, or even a woman that doesn't intend to have a baby. So I'm going to put it into they're going to get to understand their body more and become more empowered through education.
Do you think that we're good at understanding our bodies? Women in general? I'm being very general here.
I think that we're not taught about our bodies, which I think is a real problem. So you get from, you're 12 to 15 whenever you get your period and someone throws some sanitary items at you and maybe has a conversation, maybe doesn't, and we're left to figure it out. And then we move through that, we have sex for the first time and maybe it was great and maybe it wasn't, but nobody really tells us about that either. And then we move into pregnancy, same situation, postpartum, and then we've got women living in their 60s. So I think it's not that women don't know about their bodies, it's that we as a society don't give women the tools and the education to be empowered within their bodies. So that's why a conversation like this and, all the other episodes that you guys have done is so incredibly important to help to really educate women, to offer them empowerment so that they can make their own choices about their bodies each step of the way.
And I think that the empowerment is such an important thing. I know even from personally my own experience, these are big gaps in my knowledge, and especially around pregnancy, what happens before, what happens after, what happens during. And I only get to see it when it happens to friends of mine because I've not undergone it myself. And when I ask them, they're like, did you know that this happens to you? I'm like, no. And they're just facing that for the first time. So let's begin with fitness if you're pregnant.
Okay.
Is it safe? First up, can you work out when you're pregnant?
The short answer is yes. And this is one of the biggest myths that we've had in the fitness space and the general population space for a really long time is if you've not been exercising in pregnancy, don't start exercising in pregnancy. The reality is that all of the research tells us that exercise in pregnancy is safe. In fact, it's more detrimental to not move your body in pregnancy than it is to start to exercise during pregnancy.
Where do you think that misconception sort of came from?
I think there's been a fear for a really long time. Women don't know what to do. They don't know where to get proper advice from. And I think sometimes, and I say this with all due respect, like our medical industry are not necessarily trained in exercise prescription. So you go to a GP, maybe they exercise themselves, maybe they don't. And it's like, well, if you've not been exercising, don't do anything new. So I do think that the guidance is not there from a medical perspective when you go and have that first prenatal appointment to say, keep up exercise. But the guidelines tell us that pregnant women should be meeting the general exercise guidelines, which are between 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week on at least 3 days. So that's not even just a casual stroll. We want her to get her heart rate up to a moderate intensity.
Right. Okay. Because this is the interesting thing, I think, too, because if you can accept that you have to be working out or doing some kind of fitness when you're pregnant, you think, okay, but I'm not going to overdo it. I'm not going to push myself too hard.
Yep.
You're saying it is safe to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely safe. In fact, you want to be doing that because that's when you get the meaningful benefits of exercising in pregnancy.
What are the meaningful impacts of exercise during pregnancy?
Absolutely. So we want her to maintain her cardiovascular health. One of the other really important aspects of exercise during pregnancy is keeping her strength training, or at least starting strength training. So for women especially, we want to make sure that we're incorporating strength training in our exercise routine as much as possible to lay down as much muscle mass as we can before we age. But of course, she's going to be, lifting a baby. She's potentially going to be doing the most physically demanding job that she's ever done. And if she hasn't been exercising in the most deconditioned state that she's potentially ever been in. So we want to make sure that she's really moving throughout pregnancy. One of the other things is we talk about pelvic floor exercises in pregnancy. And one of the statistics out there is saying if she's doing regular pelvic floor exercises in pregnancy, it decreases incontinence by 50% in pregnancy and by 30% postpartum.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. I want to go on this a bit of a tangent now because I was going to take it somewhere else, but then now you've started talking about pelvic floor exercises.
We had to, right?
When should we be doing them? When should you start doing them? And how difficult are they?
How difficult are they? That's interesting. I mean, it's difficult if you don't know what you're supposed to be feeling, right?
Yes.
Which I think is the hard thing about pelvic floor exercises. So the first question is, when should we start doing them? I definitely don't sit in the camp of every woman should be doing pelvic floor exercises every day. And I also don't sit in the camp of saying that we need to start doing them before we even, become pregnant. I do think it's important to understand our pelvic floors way before we have babies and become pregnant, and things like understanding what is not normal, because we've got a lot of young women who might have what we call a hypertonic pelvic floor, which is a pelvic floor that's too tight. So she could be 18, 20, 25. She's exercising to a high level in a gym and she's been told to switch on and tense and tighten. So she's wound her pelvic floor up and no one's ever taught her how to relax her pelvic floor. So for younger women, if we're thinking about when should you start doing pelvic floor exercises, well, maybe the conversation is more, what signs and symptoms do we need to look out for to know that there's something that's maybe not quite right with our pelvic floor so that we can then seek out the right support and do something about it. And then that young woman, she may need pelvic floor down training or relaxation exercises instead of pelvic floor switching on exercises. So if she's looking out for signs and symptoms, it'd be things like recurring UTIs, painful sex, could be with lower back pain, hip pain. So there's definitely a lot of young women out in the world who have those symptoms and they're being sent to, they go to their GP, then they go to a gynecologist, then they might go to another GP because nothing's fixing it. They're constantly taking antibiotics and no one's helped them to fix the problem. So if that young woman could go and see a pelvic health physio, then maybe she needs to start being aware of her pelvic floor at that young age.
Okay. And then if someone is pregnant then, how beneficial is then doing pelvic floor exercises if it's right for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we want her to do pelvic floor exercises, but we want her to do them correctly. So we've talked about a hypertonic, too tight pelvic floor, and we can also talk about a pelvic floor that sometimes women get the brain muscle connection mixed up. So when she thinks she's drawing her pelvic floor up, she's actually pushing out. Yeah.
Really?
So research tells us that it's about 60% of women, when they just read from a brochure about how to do their pelvic floor or verbally someone tells them how to do it, instead of drawing up, they're actually bearing down.
Wow.
So you could be a pregnant woman going, I've got to do my pelvic floor exercises, sitting at traffic lights and pushing out instead of drawing up. Now, on one hand, you got to push a baby out. So if you are pushing down, maybe we could say that's a good thing. But on the other side, if you're then going into a gym and maybe you've been strength training pre-pregnancy and you continue to strength train throughout your pregnancy and you've got a barbell on your back or you're doing a deadlift or whatever it is, and your trainer or someone says like brace or tense or activate your pelvic floor, now you're activating your pelvic floor and you're pushing out under load.
Okay.
So that can happen in pregnancy and it can happen postpartum as well.
No, you don't necessarily want that. That's not good.
We don't want that because we don't want, we don't want bearing down through the pelvic floor. So I think rather than the question being when do we need to start, it's when should we as women be offered guidance around when something is not right.
Back to basics,
Yep.
Jen. What is a pelvic floor?
Great question.
Thank you. It was completely unscripted.
So your pelvic floor is a group of muscles, and a lot of people think that they run kind of front to back, but they don't. They sit inside the bones of your pelvis. So in a woman, you've got your bladder at the front, the uterus in the middle, and your rectum at the back. And the pelvic floor is a group of muscles that attach onto the bony pelvis, and they keep those organs. One of their main jobs is to keep those organs in the right place and in the right position.
Right.
Yep.
So when you add potentially a fetus or a child in there moving
baby.
things around, that can have big impacts.
Absolutely. There's a lot more pressure down through the pelvic floor, and she's going to put on weight, which is a very normal part of pregnancy. And again, the heavier that we are, the more potential pressure on our pelvic floor.
And if you do receive that pressure and then that damages the pelvic floor, what does that lead to?
So again, if we know our pelvic floor is working well, then ideally that pressure is managed by those well-functioning muscles. But if our pelvic floor is not working well, the the extended period of downward pressure on the pelvic floor can have them stretch and lengthen, and they don't do their job as well as they used to. The other thing, one of the major factors of any kind of pelvic floor damage is a vaginal delivery. And I don't want to say, whenever I say damage or, use certain words, I never want to create fear in women.
We've got enough. Yeah.
Yeah, there's enough. And sometimes I think that, again, I go back to the medical industry, we sometimes are not fully informed about our bodies in pregnancy and postpartum or birth because there's a thought that if she knows more, she'll have more fear. But the reality is when she knows more, she's more empowered and she can make more decisions that are right for her. So one of the main factors of a lengthened or I will use the word damaged pelvic floor is a vaginal delivery. As you can imagine, a baby the pelvic floor has to open in order for the baby to pass through it. And earlier in the conversation, we talked about a hypertonic pelvic floor, so one that's too tight. So if she doesn't know how to contract and release her pelvic floor, there's the possibility that the pelvic floor that's too tight can make having a vaginal delivery harder. There's also another measurement of the perineum. So from the perineum sits from the back of her vagina to her anus. And if that measurement, I think is about halfway through pregnancy, is under 3 centimeters, then that is a potential warning sign that she's going to have a harder delivery and she's potentially going to tear. So all of these things are, we want to know about our pelvic floors. We want to know where to get help about our pelvic floors, and then we can make conscious decisions during our pregnancy so that we get to the day of the birth with the most education and being the most prepared that we possibly can be to hopefully prevent birth trauma, pelvic floor damage, trauma, whatever it may be.
And then the recovery that then comes with that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is possible, but what should it feel like?
We can try and do one if you like.
We can try and do it. Let's do it.
Cool. So maybe just put both feet on the floor. Yeah,
both feet on the floor.
Yeah.
Yes. If you're listening at home, put both feet on the floor.
Flat on the floor. Just take your hands and just put them on your tummy because you don't want your tummy to be super tight.
Okay.
So just try and relax.
I was literally sucking
imagine
in.
there's no cameras here and just let it hang out.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Gosh.
So then just take a natural breath in and then just breathe all the way out. So you're just nice and relaxed. Good. And then we're going to take another breath in. And then on the breath out, you can imagine your front passage is drawing in and up. So when I'm saying front passage, so you've got anal sphincter at the back and then vagina in the middle. You've got urethra at the front, but let's just call vagina front passage. So we're going to gently draw in and up through your front passage. One analogy could be, imagine you've got a tampon inserted, you're squeezing it in and you're drawing it up. But don't squeeze your bum too much. Try and really feel that pelvic floor.
Okay.
So take a natural breath in. And as you breathe out, just gently draw front passage in and up.
It feels tight. Yeah, I'm
You
trying.
you can feel it
It
pulling
feels
up.
that pull up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's what we want. But a lot of people, when you ask them to do that, then they start bracing through their abdominal wall, or some people actually might feel themselves push out. And if you feel yourself push out, then that is the wrong thing. And when you're sitting on a chair, although you can't, feel your pelvic floor, you probably could feel a bit of feedback from the chair if you're pushing out. So it's as little as possible happening on the outside.
Okay.
And just feeling that drawing in and up.
Oh, I'm loving this. We're doing internal fitness. We're getting all of the fitness. I have derailed the conversation slightly.
I think that was important though.
I genuinely, I don't know these things. So I'm sure that our listeners don't know either. I promise we are going to get back to training while pregnant.
That's okay.
Too. But before we do, let's just take a quick break. And remember, if you are getting so much out of this podcast, people in your life are going to get so much out of it as well. So make sure you share this episode with someone you love. Because I completely derailed us before, Jen, if we return to pregnant women training to benefit their bodies and their minds, though, I think that's probably a key thing here too, right? It's safe for women to train and it's going to benefit not only them physically but mentally.
Yep.
Has that been your experience?
Absolutely. Perinatal and postnatal depression is a thing, and we know that exercise and movement helps to mitigate that, and especially because then we put women often in group training environments and they have this circle of support because there's so many women raising babies without their village or without the village that they grew up with. So an exercise environment is a really good way to create that village in a really, healthy and safe space.
And you can have these conversations.
Yes.
Conversations that we should have been having for decades.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's like this is the first opportunity for so many people.
When I educate trainers, I often say to them, you're a conversation starter. Yes, you've got all this knowledge, but at the end of the day, you start conversations with women about things that they're often not being spoken to about anywhere else.
How often should a pregnant woman be training if she's feeling able to? If she has the capacity, how often can she be training? How long can she be training for?
The ideal recommendations are that you're moving for around 60 minutes each day. Yeah. And including strength training on at least 2 days per week. But I would, if you've been training, I wouldn't say it says 2 days a week, so now only train 2 days a week. If you're used to strength training, or even if you're not and you're enjoying it, so we can take a woman who's never done any strength training before, match her up with a trainer who knows what they're doing, ease her into a strength training environment. She could be strength training 3-4 days a week, and it could be really, really beneficial.
That's something I think is key.
Yeah. People
who maybe haven't even done any fitness previously then find themselves pregnant. It's like, well, why would I start now? You should.
Please do.
Yeah, please do. Please do. Is there different workouts or different levels of intensity of workout that women should be doing based on a trimester? So first trimester versus second trimester and then the last trimester, what they should and shouldn't be doing?
I'd rather align with the woman and how she's feeling rather than, you should do this in the first trimester, you should do this in the second. Obviously, we've got, some women will want to go slower in that, not obviously, but some women will want to go slower in the first trimester, especially if they've had, experienced pregnancy loss or they've had IVF or they've struggled to get pregnant. It still is the more tentative time, that first 12 weeks of being pregnant. So she may very well want to slow down and we really need to respond to that. Someone who's become pregnant, and I'm going to say relatively easily with a lot of awareness that that's not everyone's experience, may just want to continue training pretty much in the same way that she's been doing beforehand. I would start to down train any strong abdominal core work, so crunches and big twists, just to start to let that abdominal wall kind of relax a little bit, to start to allow space for a growing baby, and that continues throughout the whole pregnancy. But in terms of specific guidelines, third trimester, she's bigger, her center of gravity has moved, so we're going to need to adapt exercises as we get bigger and heavier. But again, somebody else might be third trimester and still moving really well. So it's going to be down to the way the woman feels in each trimester, and also the trainer that's working with her or the class that she's in, looking at how she's moving, listening to what she's feeling. Like, is she feeling pressure through her pelvic floor? If she is doing Olympic lifting, so the guidelines do say to use single arm. You might use a dumbbell instead of a barbell, so that we don't change the line of how she moves from the ground up ahead. A lot of women don't do that and they change the bar path, but a lot of those women will also afterwards say it was really hard to get that movement back again. Some people will say, I want to run throughout my whole pregnancy. But what about her pelvic floor?
Yeah.
So, when you run, there's downward pressure on your pelvic floor and on your pelvis the whole way through. So I sit in the camp of saying, once you hit that 24, 25 weeks, maybe consider doing something else. Again, we'll see women run throughout the whole pregnancy. They'll say, I'm fine. I've never heard anyone say that I wish I'd run through my pregnancy that didn't. I've heard lots of women say, I wish I'd stopped running through my pregnancy because my pelvic floor maybe is not the same.
So we're training when we're pregnant, and that is completely safe.
Mm-hmm.
When should you really ease off though? When should you not be doing anything?
Yeah, when you just said it's completely safe, I just want to highlight if there's any medical conditions or if anything doesn't feel right, it's not the time to push through. So although we really want to advocate for exercise, we also want to advocate for if you feel some contractions that are not normal, or there's any bleeding or any fluid, or you're feeling dizzy, like it's not like, your trainer would be like, just keep going anyway. Well, hopefully not. But pregnancy is not the time to keep going if something doesn't feel right. So always do consult back to your medical professional, your GP or your midwife or obstetrician. But outside of that, generally it's safe. The next question was, when do you stop? I don't know. I've had women go into labour the next day.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. And completely fine.
Completely fine.
Depends on the person.
Well, it depends on the person, and it's, there's modifications that we want to make during pregnancy. There's, for a long time we were told not to have women laying flat on their back during exercise. This is a piece of information that's been questioned a lot over the last couple of years, and the research tells us that whilst there's no research that says it's definitely unsafe, there's still no research that tells us it's definitely safe. So, some schools of thought will say, well, the research doesn't tell us that it's unsafe to exercise lying on your back. My personal philosophy is, well, why would you? After the first trimester, that's when the conservative guidelines. So I would recommend that if you're pregnant, just, 45-degree angle, you can still do your chest presses. You can do, anything that you would normally do in a supine, either inside lying on all fours or just in a slightly different position. So there's definitely some modifications that we want to make. The other one is back to the pelvic floor conversation. If you're doing an exercise and you start to feel any bearing down or any leaking or any heaviness in your pelvis, then it might be that type of exercise that you're doing at the moment isn't right, and that's when we adapt.
Let's talk more about the first trimester. Do you have any tips or advice for people who are struggling with morning sickness, which I have had friends who've had hyperemesis, and I've seen how debilitating that is. Yeah. And morning sickness seems to be not the right phrase, just anytime sickness. How can they stay motivated? How can they keep going? Are there any tips that they can do?
I think, there's this fine line between now adding a layer of saying, well, we should be exercising during pregnancy because now we know we should. But I think like anything in motherhood, listening to your body, doing what is right for you. And if you are in a position where you cannot exercise or you're not able to hold food down, we don't want to necessarily add, the extra energy expenditure on top of that. So look, if you can move, it may be helpful. If it is morning sickness and you can train in the afternoon, well, let's do that. But even just grabbing 5-10 minutes of movement, it doesn't have to be a massive gym workout in order for it to be great movement. So what you can when you can, and if you can't, no guilt.
Oh, that's the hard one, right?
Yep.
Postpartum. When is it, I'm using in air quotes here, safe to think about getting back into some kind of physical exercise?
Again, I think that, we can start doing, if you feel comfortable, very basic exercises as soon as you feel ready. So, pelvic floor switch-ons, transverse abdominis exercises. So starting to activate the inner abdominal wall. So you've got 4 layers of abdominal muscles. You've got your rectus abdominis down the front, external obliques, internal oblique, transverse abdominis is the innermost layer, and it works in conjunction with your pelvic floor. So we can start to think about TA exercises early on. We can start to think about, it might be even just some chest stretching, because a woman's chest gets quite tight in pregnancy because she's leaning forward and then she's breastfeeding, or at least feeding if she can't breastfeed. So we want to, gentle stretching that opens up her chest, potentially some back activation exercises that are working the rhomboids. So she keeps the, chest Chest open and
The
back
posture.
strong. Absolutely. Hip flexor stretching, glute activations. Again, your hips, you're sitting down a lot. You've got that forward movement. So, basic postural exercises, she can start whenever she likes. The general guidelines still at the moment are to go back into a gym or start to formally train is you need to have your 6-week checkup from your doctor, your GP, or your midwife. The important thing to remember about the 6-week checkup, though, is it's not a clearance to exercise.
Okay.
The 6-week checkup is the end of her postpartum medical care. And in the fitness industry, we've used that to say, and now you're cleared to exercise. What it needs to be is now you're cleared to move back into or to move forward into I'm going to use a rehabilitation phrase and know that some people will go, well, pregnancy is not an injury. No, it's not. But rehabilitation or rebuilding phase to get you moving forward into the exercise that you want to do. So,
Okay.
But then other people, they won't want to do anything for 12 weeks because maybe they had a traumatic experience. It can be really, really hard for women, especially because I think there's still a fear, if you've had a traumatic delivery, if your pelvic floor is not working, if you've got tearing, we're not given standard return to exercise support. And some women can be told by uneducated, and again, I want this to come across in the right way. Our medical professionals are amazing. They're not, many of them are not exercise. They don't prescribe exercise.
Yeah.
But if she's being told, well, you can't exercise or you can't do this, then it's really debilitating from a mental health perspective. Like she's now a mum. She feels different. She's now putting her baby first. So she's even lower at the bottom of the priority list. So a woman like that needs to find a practitioner that knows how to work with her, that can guide her on a journey of rebuilding from the inside out, and that can share with her that, all of these things that happen in birth are not the end of her exercise journey. We've just got to figure out what's right for you right now and how to move you forward in the best possible way.
I know we don't want to scare people, but it scared me.
Yep.
Incontinence. How common is that after giving birth?
It's a very common but not normal
Interesting.
part of having a baby. So I think one of the biggest things is that women accept that incontinence is normal. It's not normal, it's common. We have 2 different types of incontinence. So you've got urge incontinence, which is like, I need to go to the toilet and I need to go right now. And then you have stress incontinence, which is, if we're thinking about an exercise environment, if she's running, jumping, even squatting, creating any kind of pressure, that's when she might get some kind of stress, even coughing, sneezing. I'm sure you've heard older women say, I don't want to laugh or I sneeze and they cross their legs. And
yes.
And that's the common part. And that's where it's normalized. But we want to normalize the conversation about incontinence, but not normalize the acceptance of incontinence.
So there's things that can be done.
Absolutely.
You don't have to accept that that's your forever.
No. And we want to make sure that women do get that support by modifying the exercise that they're doing if it's creating incontinence, and seeing a pelvic health physiotherapist to get individualized pelvic floor support to know what she needs, because she could be experiencing incontinence with a pelvic floor that's too tight because it can't contract more to keep her, can't release and then contract to keep her continent. Or she may have what's called a lower tone pelvic floor where it just can't contract to keep her continent. So we want to get her we want to say, yep, you've got incontinence. Let's laugh about it. Let's accept it. Then let's do something about it. Get her to a pelvic health physio, figure out what's happening with the pelvic floor. It could also be the positioning of her bladder. There's a lot of things that could cause incontinence, and then figure out the best next steps and make sure she's getting the right support, but not accepting it.
How have you seen your clients change over the course of when they first come to you and they're having these kind of conversations, which can be scary conversations, to a point where they're, I guess they have the knowledge about what's going on with their own bodies now?
It can be such an empowering experience. You're going to get probably 2 schools of women if we put it into the incontinence space. You've got the one that is like, I'm running, I go for a run, my socks are wet every time I come home because she's been leaking the whole time she's been running, but she wants to run and she thinks it's normal. And then you get the other one that's leaking or has incontinence and she's scared to run. So we don't want to scare the one that's leaking and running into not running, but we want to say to her, hey, that's not normal. We want to get you to see a physio. The physio is going to support you. Maybe we use a pessary, which is like a silicone device that's inserted and might lift the organs of the pelvis off her pelvic floor so that she can remain continent. But when they get the right support, it's a game changer. It's like my body is now functioning in a way that feels better. I don't feel like I'm broken. I don't feel like, there's something wrong with me. And I don't feel like I have to live with a secret that I'm not talking about. A woman's confidence level can change dramatically when she's educated about her body.
That's the thing. It's making it not a secret.
And it flows into every area of life. She feels better about herself. She walks out into the world better. Maybe she goes to get a job because she's got more confidence in doing that, which then contributes to our economy. She then leads by example for her children, and we need our children to be exercising and moving. So there's a huge impact when mum is looked after.
How would you recommend people start those conversations with their GPs or their health practitioners? Like, what are some of the questions that they can ask to advocate for themselves?
You could ask about, you could ask pelvic floor questions. You could ask exercise questions. I think it's more understanding what the answers are. One of the big ones are they referring you to a pelvic health physiotherapist? Because that's one of the missing links. So in an ideal world, and if there's any politicians listening, let's have a conversation. But every woman should get pelvic health physiotherapy as part of her birth journey. So if we can get her to go back to a pelvic health physiotherapist after that 6-week checkup, we can really understand where her body is right now, and then she can move forward into exercise fully informed about where her body's at.
What is a pelvic health physio?
Yeah, so a pelvic health physio is not the same as I'm going to say normal physiotherapist. If you want to put them into a box, they might be dealing with like from here to here, like,
Okay, mid-thigh to ribs.
Yeah, although a lot of pelvic health physios will go, we're musculoskeletal physios too. We deal with the whole body, which is absolutely correct. But they're looking after things like abdominal wall. So does she have abdominal separation? Can she support that? Looking after her pelvic floor, looking after her pelvis. So any of those things that women experience in pregnancy and postpartum are looked after by a pelvic health physiotherapist. They might do internal examinations to check to see if she might have a prolapse. They might use something called real-time ultrasound, where a woman can actually, the pelvic floor exercises that we did at the beginning.
Yes. Using
real-time ultrasound, she can actually see it's her bladder neck moving up and down, but then she gets that brain visual feedback of what her pelvic floor is doing.
And she can know if she's actually
absolutely
or
yes,
bearing
we can
down.
see it, and we can see if it's pushing down. So, if every woman had at least 2 sessions with a pelvic health physiotherapist, we'd be doing the right thing.
How can we potentially make this postpartum rebuilding journey and take that and translate it into a long-term habit that potentially wasn't there before?
I think you've got the cohort of women who are afraid to exercise in pregnancy, and then you've got another cohort of women that say, I'm pregnant, now I need to move because it's not only about me. So if we can put a solid support system around her in pregnancy and postpartum, and then she starts going to a gym or a local exercise group that has lots of other mums there, then it becomes part of that habit forming process.
That's the key, is the community, right?
Absolutely.
Because I know friends of mine who've really struggled to get back to the gym. Maybe their partner's working and they just don't have the time. They don't have the family around them, but they've then found a gym that has a creche, or they've got, mums and bubs classes, and it's been life-changing for
Absolutely.
them.
I think it's really important to know that if you were exercising beforehand and it's not feeling right now, there are lots of other options out there. So finding a space where you feel comfortable, where the trainer that you're working with or the class that you're walking into has knowledge to support you, because it's when women feel like, the trainer doesn't really understand me, that they potentially stop going, and then it's harder to pick up that habit later on. I think as well, a lot of women will walk into a gym, and the trainer, if they're doing a goal setting session, will say to them, do you want to get your pre-baby body back? Or the whole conversation is wrapped around the fact that she should be smaller, or the only motivation that she has or should have to move her body is to get her pre-baby body back. And if no trainer or no instructor or no gym ever use the language, get your pre-baby body back again, I think we'd be doing a massive service to our postpartum women. And if we can promote more of that rebuild from the inside out, so really get to know your body, your pelvic floor, your abdominal wall, all of your postural, muscles and do all those basic exercises, then we'd be setting women up for, one, not feeling bad about herself all the time, but two, a lifetime of exercise built on a really strong foundation.
Your body's just going to be different, isn't it?
Of course.
It's not going to be the same.
No, and we think that women should be, well, number one, we think smaller is better, and we need to get rid of that language. And we need to ensure that all women know that their self-worth is not wrapped up in the size or shape of their body.
And your body literally just created a human. So,
yeah,
it's gone through a bit.
Absolutely. I've worked with so many women who've taken the pressure off, gone through that rebuilding process. They learn all the things that they never knew about their body, and maybe now they're stronger and fitter than they'd ever been before.
It could be a new love story with your body.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Yeah. I think it's a really good opportunity, especially women that have maybe over-exercised, under-eaten, messes up your metabolism, right? And, throughout pregnancy, you're likely to put on some body weight. We also have this big opportunity to reset your metabolism and reset those habits and those thought patterns, and also make sure that we're not passing that on to our children.
What kind of conversations have you had with clients about balancing?
What is that word?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Balancing new motherhood and still taking care of yourself without feeling guilt. I mean, how does that go?
When you said the word balance, I wanted to respond with balance is doing the best you can in any given moment. I think that's important. And then the other word I heard there was guilt. It's like, let's release the guilt. And there's guilt on both sides, right? Like if I, leave my child with someone to go do some, or even if they're in a gym with a creche and I leave them in the creche, I'm like, oh, are they okay? And I feel guilty the whole time. So, and then if I don't do that, I feel guilty because I'm not looking after myself. So I think the biggest message that we can get across is release all guilt, because we're never going to do the right thing for everybody. And then also really start to understand that taking time for yourself is so incredibly important. A lot of people will say, you need to look after yourself to be the best mum you can be. Well, I call bullshit on that and say you need to look after yourself because you deserve to be looked after as a woman, and you get to be a great mum if you're being looked after. So I think looking after ourselves, it's not always the big things either. It can be closing the door on the toilet and having an extra 5 minutes on your phone when everyone's screaming outside because that's all you can get. It's not cooking dinner tonight because takeaway is the best thing for your mental health, not feeling like you have to do another thing. It's asking for help, which I think is a really key one because a lot of women don't ask for help.
Do you have any more practical kind of tips about how best to work in workouts in the life of a busy mum?
Yeah.
Like finding that time.
I think motherhood has seasons of life, or seasons. We all have seasons of life. A new mum may or may not be able to get out the door. So what about a workout at home? Even, finding on YouTube, there's a lot of free stuff out there these days as well as there is paid for elements. So a 15-minute workout at home, a walk with the baby when the baby's sleeping. I also want to say you sleep as well at that point, but, and just looking at and being ready to adjust if something's not working out. But I go back to the community as well. It's like if you know that the space you're going to for a workout has community, there's that extra element of wanting to get there.
You talk about, just mentioned sleep there. How big of a factor is sleep deprivation for a new mum and how it affects them?
You've got two schools, right? So I've got this friend who's had a baby recently and he talks about how his child sleeps and all of this kind of thing goes on. And then he feels guilty for talking about that.
Oh, yeah.
And I can relate to that because I was the mum of a sleeper the first time around. So my son, I'd put him down to sleep and he'd go to sleep and I'd turn up to a mother's group and they're all talking about how to get your child to sleep. And I'm like, you do this, 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 and this, and then they go to sleep. Fast forward 2 years later and I get a child that didn't sleep at all. In fact, she didn't have a full night's sleep for the whole 18 months of her life, first 18 months of her life. And she was still waking us up at, 10, 11, 12. So I went back to my mother's group, promptly apologized, had nothing to do with me, all to do with the child. Sleep is huge and mums are not getting it. Rest or workout, probably rest 9 times out of 10. It's not when we start, it's not the time of life to just push through things. On the flip side, energy can create energy. So we need to, again, work with someone if we need support or really think about is exercise going to help me feel more energized, or is it actually just going to wipe me out for the rest of the day? And then make choices. And it's going to be different every day of the week.
And cut yourself some slack.
Absolutely. And change the workout. Like a great trainer, if you're walking into a group environment with a trainer, will ask you, how do you feel today on the scale of 1 to 10? How did you sleep last night? And if they've got a really, high intensity or heavy workout plan, they're going to change that based on your answers. And they're also going to be able to change that for every single person in the room. So you might have a group of 10 mums, and a great instructor will have all 10 mums doing something slightly different based on their body and based on their capacity on any given day.
Number one takeaway, I know it's hard because we've had about 58 million takeaways, but what's such a key takeaway that you want our listeners to know?
Advocate for yourself. If there's something with your body, either pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, postpartum, and way beyond that. So we've got women in their 40s, 50s, 60s still living with contraindications or symptoms that may have been caused by pregnancy or postpartum, and everyone's told them it's normal. If something isn't normal for you, go and get support. And that support could be with your GP, your obstetrician, your midwife. Beyond that, it could be with a pelvic health physiotherapist. If you're walking into a gym, find a trainer that has education in pre- and postnatal exercise and ask the questions. So don't settle for someone just telling you something is normal. Ask questions and ask them again, and then find somebody else.
Love that. You don't accept that the new normal
Absolutely
is
not.
normal.
It's not normal. That's the thing. What even is normal though?
Jen, thank you so much for joining us on Fernwood Unfiltered this week. Where can we find you? Where are the best resources for you?
Absolutely. So my website is mumsafemovement.com. So if you're a mum or a trainer, you can go and find me there. I also like hanging out on Instagram, which is just my name @Jen Dugard.
Love that.
So if anyone's got any questions, I'm so happy to answer questions.
Well, Jen, thank you so much for answering all of the questions that I have fired at you today. I've learned so much, and if I've learned so much, it means that you're going to have learned so much, and someone in your life who needs this conversation will learn so much. So make sure you share this episode. That's been another episode of Fernwood Unfiltered. Until next time.